Tonight on Wildlife Police, we join the undercover investigators on the trail of the criminals who kill, maim and steal wildlife for fun and for money. We've some incredible real-life video pictures of crimes actually taking place, and we go on the raids as we join the Wildlife Police. Tonight, will this man get away with a crime he's happy to boast about? The police and RSPB are turning his house upside down, searching for incredibly rare birds' eggs. But to secure a conviction, they have to crack his secret code. And we follow the investigation of this man. He ordered the killing of some of the world's rarest creatures. A raid on his house reveals all sorts of endangered animals, killed to be stuffed and sold for vast amounts of money. A typical bit of British countryside, an ideal home for badgers. But equally, this could be the scene for one of the most notorious wildlife crimes. This is the story of a man who infiltrated a gang of badger baiters. He persuaded them to let him film their activities, and as soon as he had the footage he wanted, he went straight to the authorities. The images caused an outrage and changed the law, making badger baiting a crime for which you could go to prison for. This video is made for UK Animal Watch by a painter and decorator turned undercover cameraman. At the time it was filmed, all these men could expect to get, if they were caught, was a fine of just £2,000. Mickey infiltrates gangs of badger baiters and other wildlife criminals using video to get the evidence to convict them. His face is disguised to avoid retaliation from the people he helps to convict.
So I suppose it's acting, really. You've got to become a part of them. You've got to learn the lingo. I actually live in their houses. I sleep on their settees. You can't slip up because they'll soon suss you out.
Mickey's footage shows men who get their kicks from killing animals. According to protection groups, badgers are chosen because they'll put up a good fight, whatever the odds against them.
Badgers have been persecuted so much historically because they're seen by terrier men, for example, men who have dogs, as the ultimate test for their dogs, because the badger will fight to the death and they are a very powerful animal.
It's thought that 10,000 badgers are killed by badger baiting every year. Another 50,000 are killed on the roads, though it's not necessarily quite that clear-cut.
More and more frequently now we're finding that apparent road casualties have not actually been killed by vehicles. They've either been snared and shot, or they've been the victims of badger baiting, and then they've been dumped on the sides of the road to look like a road casualty.
Go on, bitch.
Mickey's filming the men digging out a badger from a set. They let their dogs attack it there and then. Sometimes the badger is removed to a specially prepared pit.
This slide shows a typical badger baiting pit. The badger would be dug from its set, put into the pit so that the dogs can attack it. Because the badger is such a powerful animal, it will first be disabled by the men involved. They'll either break its jaw, break its back with a heavy instrument. They often shoot them perhaps in the legs so that they're disabled, and then it gives the dogs more of a chance to attack the badger without being injured too much themselves. This slide is a typical example of a badger that's been baited. As you can see, the injuries are quite horrific.
Mickey always assumes a careful disguise to hide his identity and to fit in with his new friends.
I went out and brought clothing, what made me look like a badger digger, the type of clothes badger diggers wears. I bought shovels, pickaxes, I bought the lot. So people would think that when they see me that I was a badger digger myself.
Mickey soon gained the confidence of this gang. They allowed him to openly film their fun, so long as he didn't film their faces.
After a couple of points, they said, well, we know you're not police or RSPCA or any other organisation. And I practically knew straight away that I'd been accepted with these people.
Badger protection groups have a very different approach to foiling the baiters. Here at a set on the North Yorkshire moors, a volunteer checks for signs of interference. He fears for his safety and doesn't want his face to be seen.
They're not necessarily always local people who interfere with sets. The motorways have been an absolute godsend to badger diggers. They can leave Yorkshire at 6 o'clock tonight and be in the West Country by the morning, and they can dig badgers down there to their heart's content all weekend.
The diggers often know the whereabouts of active sets better than the protection groups themselves.
There have been cases where maps have been found after RSPCA and police raids on badger diggers' houses, and if you put the badger diggers' map at the side of a badger group member's map, then it's frightening. You might as well tear your map up because they've got 10 times the number of sets on their maps that you have.
The volunteers' dedication does pay off, with dozens of successful prosecutions, but their big problem is being in the right place at the right time. Which is why Mickey chooses to go undercover to infiltrate the badger baiting gangs. Accepted as a bona fide badger digger, Mickey can now openly film the full baiting expedition. The gang meet up on a farm in mid-Wales and set off in search of badgers.
We called it a farm, and the farmer actually gave these guys permission to actually go and get the badgers out. And this is where we ended up.
The terriers are already in the set. Lurchers wait to pull the badger out. The men use electronic locators to track the dogs underground. One of the men can be seen using the radio receiver, a white box in his hand. It shows where the terriers have cornered a badger in a tunnel.
I've got it here. Right. Will he pull it out? Yeah.
After 5 minutes, during which the badger's been beaten, kicked and shot, the badger lies dead. A second badger is hauled from the set, shot twice and finished off by the dogs. A third badger is stabbed 8 times, then its throat is cut.
This actual dig on here took a couple of hours. I mean, they absolutely destroyed an whole family of badgers.
The men are prosecuted by the League Against Cruel Sports for the injuries received to the dogs. A conviction could result in a prison sentence, whereas prosecuting them for badger baiting could only result in a small fine. An angry mob stormed the courts while the baiters, wearing smart suits, arrived to hear the evidence. The case hinges on Mickey's film.
Their solicitors tried to stop the video being shown, but in the end it did. And that really showed the judge what type of people these are and how cruel they are. And I could even see the judge's face now. His eyes just lit up in disgust.
In the face of such evidence, the men plead guilty and are jailed for 3 months for causing unnecessary suffering to their dog, Jock. There was public outcry at the absurdity of the case. This and Mickey's film caused a change in the law. Now convicted badger baiters face 6 months in jail. Despite this success, Mickey's method of catching baiters by filming badgers being killed is criticised by many badger protection groups. But in his opinion, there is no foolproof alternative.
This is the ultimate way to catch a badger digger.
Because if I wasn't on this badger dig, these guys were going to do it anyway. And I'm just there to get the evidence.
In part 2 of Wildlife Police, the raid on a man whose house was full to the brim of dead animals. From Siberian tigers to penguins, even bags containing the heads of chimpanzees. And an egg collector receives an early morning call from the police.
So she looks it? Yeah, but I wanted to search your house, okay?
His house is turned upside down, but trying to find the eggs proves to be the easy part of this detective story. Taxidermists can legally stuff any animal that dies of natural causes. Nicholas Peters ran a thriving business selling all kinds of dead animals, including the heads of chimpanzees. But Peters got greedy. He started supplying illegally killed tigers, monkeys, even penguins. And his luck ran out when he ordered the killing of one of the world's rarest creatures. This man, Nick Peters, helps to bring some of the world's rarest birds and animals closer to extinction. He ran an illegal business behind a legitimate front. It was this rare specimen which put him behind bars. Peters, a Dutchman, lived in this house in Wales. From here, he ran a company selling products and specimens legally to the taxidermy trade. It provided the perfect cover for a smuggling operation. RSPB investigators had been suspicious of Peters for some time, but even they were shocked when they finally searched and filmed the house.
It was literally like walking into a museum. Every room you walked into, there were specimens of one sort or another, mammals, birds, insects, all sorts of things. In the living room, I can remember a chimpanzee head on the TV, an eagle head on the windowsill, and the same thing happened upstairs, rooms full of specimens.
An even more gruesome treasure trove was found in the roof space.
Going up into this sort of semi-lit, darkened attic and climbing amongst the rafters and being surrounded by skulls and complete skeletons of very large mammals. I can recall 2 or 3 complete hippopotamus skulls, the entire skeleton of a dolphin, and a huge variety of other specimens, all just almost glowing in the semi-darkness of the attic.
The sheer quantity of endangered species was surprising. This is the skin of a Komodo dragon from Indonesia, the world's largest lizard. And Peters was asking £1,250 for this pregnant ring-tailed lemur, complete with her fetuses.
He was a very cold, calculating individual. I doubt very much whether he had any respect at all for the animals and the birds that he was concerned with. Some of them were carcasses that still had the flesh of the animal attaching to them.
Duncan McNiven and the other RSPB and customs officers took more than 11 hours to search the house. Hundreds of packets containing Filipino birds were taken outside to be identified.
They were from a huge range of species, everything from very large hornbills all the way down to tiny little sunbirds. And it became very quickly apparent that we had some highly endangered birds here, which had probably been illegally imported.
This piece of evidence was the key that opened Nick Peters' front door. It's from one of the most critically endangered species on the planet, a Philippine or monkey-eating eagle. Because Peters was no expert, he sent the skull to a professional taxidermist to be cleaned. This was his fatal mistake. The taxidermist realised immediately the rarity of the bird and alerted the authorities.
When a guy put the phone down, I think there was a collective dropping of jaws, because none of us could really contemplate the idea that such an incredibly rare specimen was circulating in the United Kingdom.
The bird feeds on monkeys it snatches from trees, but due to poaching and habitat loss, it's estimated there are just 900 of these birds left.
What we had here was a specimen which was rarer than a tiger, rarer even than a giant panda. It's a critically endangered species. It couldn't possibly have been acquired legally. Documentation which Customs seized from the house suggested that he had it shot to order by a Filipino contact, and that he'd paid as little as $100 for the skull.
No one can be sure just how much this skull would fetch on the black market. Peters could certainly have made several £1,000s. The Philippine eagle, like all endangered species, is protected by an international conservation agreement called CITES, which bans trade in the rarest animals and birds. It's believed that Peters avoided these regulations by using old CITES documents over and over again to illegally export numerous endangered species.
Nicholas Peters' main motivation was profit. We're of the firm view that his wealth and profits increased dramatically once he began to become involved in the illegal side of the business.
Peters brags in one letter that he can get hold of any specimen in the world, no matter how rare. With such a reputation, he could name his price, as his stock list shows. An orangutan for £16,500, a baby elephant £6,000, and the priceless Philippine eagle.
The wild population is so small, any trade at all in the specimens is liable to drive this bird towards extinction. I mean, it's teetering on the edge of extinction anyway.
Peters pleaded guilty to 8 specimen charges of smuggling endangered species and was jailed for 2 years. The police had to return the majority of his stock. But the Philippine eagle skull is still in the vaults of Customs and Excise, testament to the biggest smuggling case of its kind in Europe. Birdwatching is a pastime enjoyed by hundreds of thousands of people. Some of us enjoy simply recognising a migrating bird when we're out on a country walk. Others spend hours on end in a hide, simply waiting for a glimpse of an unusual species. Barry Shevels has a passion for birds, bordering on an obsession. He dreams of spotting Britain's rarest creatures, but spotting them isn't enough. He also wants their eggs. It's a dawn raid on the home of a known egg collector.
Hello there. Mr. Shevels? Yeah, for the warrant to search your house, okay?
For PC Paul Henry, Wildlife Liaison Officer for Northumbria Police, and the RSPB who filmed the raid, it's the culmination of months of hard work collecting information on this man, Barry Shevels. PC Henry believes Shevels has been up to his old tricks, but it needs detective work to find the eggs and prove when they were taken.
I'll tell him no, there's no deal out there.
Warrants are a very stressful time for a police officer. There's always a period of nerves. What will you find? Will you find what you're looking for, or won't you? Will it be successful or not?
PC Paul Henry obtained his search warrant because Barry Shevels had been acting suspiciously near a peregrine falcon nest in Cumbria. Egg collecting differs from other wildlife crimes. It's a crime of passion, not profit.
The people who take eggs regularly, I call them professional egg collectors. That often confuses people because they then think they are getting money for the eggs, and 99 times out of 100 they don't get any money for the eggs. They're taking them for their own selfish, obsessive behaviour.
The search for the eggs continues. Every nook and cranny is thoroughly checked. As the house is turned upside down, Barry is asked to lift the floorboards.
Why have you got this marked map, Barry?
Which one?
The one that's in the RSPB's officer's hands. One of the best things we found on the initial stages of the search were a box in the bedroom which contained equipment used by egg collectors. It contained maps, Ordnance Survey maps, which had marks of rare bird nest sites on them, which is always an indication of this activity. But more importantly, we found data cards, which is something that egg collectors do use, and they show details such as clutch size, location, species name, and also whom the egg was collected by. And in this case, Barry had written on Barry Shevels. Is it not right that data cards relate to egg collections?
Possibly.
Do these data cards relate to your egg collection?
No.
These are Barry Shevels' meticulous records that suggest he's guilty. They show where and when he got his catch, but the year of the thefts is in code. Shevels admits to previous convictions for egg stealing. He has a great knowledge of birds, but instead of just bird watching, he likes to bring home a trophy at the end of the day. He told us of his obsession.
I've been sleepwalking and looking for eggs in my sleep, and just people didn't believe it, but that's what happens to you. You're semi-conscious. Your brain's ticking out all the time. You know you're asleep, thinking of what could be that year, this season, you know.
PC Henry is worried. Evidence is mounting up, but not enough for a conviction. Barry protests his innocence throughout. There's just one place left to search.
Do you keep everything in the loft?
No, anyway.
An officer searched the loft, which on first appearances appeared empty. But hidden underneath the insulation, we found 2 boxes. What's in these boxes, Barry? What's in these boxes?
Barry realises the game is up and that PC Henry has got his man.
You know what they are, didn't you?
Is that your ring? Tell us what they are.
Is that your ring?
So these boxes both contain eggs then?
Looks like it, doesn't it?
Is there anything else up here whilst I'm here?
Nah, there's only 2 boxes.
You told us there weren't any boxes though, so how can one believe that?
The eggs are seized. The boxes contain 48 eggs, including 4 incredibly rare osprey eggs.
For the osprey's eggs that I took, that is the only clutch of 4 that's ever been taken this century. I felt absolutely gutted because them ospreys were my personal best.
The boxes contain other threatened species, buzzards, peregrines and nightjars. The police can charge Sheevels for possession of the eggs, but he can only be convicted of stealing the eggs if there's proof that they were taken in the past 2 years. PC Henry is assisted by the man who filmed this raid. Keith Morton from the RSPB's Special Investigations Department has the task of sorting through the seized documents.
It was essential to be able to date the paperwork and work out when the events described took place. Now, we were able to do that because the entries in the notebooks were of identifiable nest sites.
Now the detective work really starts. The cards detail nest sites, the day, the month, but not the year that the eggs were stolen. Local bird experts all over Britain scour their records of egg-stealing activity. Very soon a pattern emerges, and there's proof that these eggs were taken in the last 2 years. Barry Sheevels is found guilty of being in possession of the 48 eggs found in the house. And by cracking the code of his collecting cards, he's also convicted of actually taking a further 15, even though the police have no idea where they are.
This was the first occasion, certainly the first occasion that I'm aware of, where an egg collector has been convicted of taking eggs purely on the basis of written evidence.
Barry is fined £1,000 and ordered to pay £300 costs. But will that stop him?
Egg collecting's it's my life. I just love going, and I could never get out of my system. It's in there, and it's in there to stay.
It's right that Northumbria Police target offenders. He will certainly be a target for me. I will continue to gather intelligence on his activities as and when I can, and if I have reasonable grounds to suspect he is committing offences, I'll obviously take the necessary action once again.
Another remarkable case where patience, dedication and good old-fashioned detective work really paid off.
And Anna's back with more Cops Helping Creatures next week at the same time. More police work next tonight too. Details in a mo.